Welcome to Caesar's Journal, your go-to podcast for thrilling stories and eerie tales. Get ready for tonight's episode titled Timothy's Eyes. The narrow road twisted through the dense forests of rural Virginia, each turn taking Caitlin Villanueva deeper into an unsettling isolation. As the hired car rumbled along the gravel driveway of the Davola estate, she peered out at the sprawling, ivy-clad mansion. The house, with its tall, narrow windows and steeply pitched roof, looked like something plucked from a Gothic novel. It was June 13th, 1999, and the summer heat pressed down heavily, adding to her sense of unease. She stepped out of the car, her nerves tingling with anticipation and anxiety. Caitlin had traveled far from her home in Peru to work as an au pair, and the Davolas had seemed like a dream family in their letters and phone calls. She adjusted her backpack and took a deep breath before walking up to the grand front door. It swung open before she could knock, revealing Rose Davola's welcoming smile. "Welcome, Caitlin. We've been eagerly awaiting your arrival," Rose said, her voice warm but slightly strained. Rose, a striking woman in her early 40s, was dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, even though it was a Saturday. Bruce Davola appeared behind his wife, a scholarly-looking man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Hello, Caitlin. I'm Bruce. It's so good to finally meet you in person." Caitlin smiled, feeling some of her anxiety melt away. "Thank you, Mrs. Davola, Mr. Davola. I'm excited to be here." "Please call us Rose and Bruce," Rose insisted, guiding Caitlin inside. The interior of the house was as grand and imposing as the outside, filled with antique furniture and an array of peculiar artifacts that hinted at Bruce's academic interests. The air was cool and faintly perfumed with lavender, but there was an undercurrent of something older, muskier. "And this," Rose said, leading Caitlin to a sunlit room at the back of the house, "is Timothy." Timothy Joseph Davola was a delicate-looking boy of 9, sitting in a motorized wheelchair. His hair was a light blonde, and his eyes a piercing blue that seemed to look right through Caitlin. He smiled shyly as Caitlin entered the room. "Hello, Timothy," Caitlin said warmly, kneeling to his level. "I'm Caitlin. I'm here to help take care of you." "Hi, Caitlin," Timothy replied, his voice soft and polite. "Do you like stories? I love stories." Rose's smile grew, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Was it fear? Worry? Caitlin couldn't quite tell. "Timothy loves to read. He's very bright for his age," Rose said, her tone almost too enthusiastic. As Caitlin settled into her new role, the days began to blend into a routine of caring for Timothy, helping with his lessons and exploring the house. She learned that Rose spent most of her days working long hours in Washington, D.C., while Bruce was often engrossed in his research at the nearby University of Virginia. This left Caitlin and Timothy alone in the sprawling mansion for hours on end. Despite the grandeur of the house, Caitlin couldn't shake a lingering sense of unease. Timothy was a sweet child, but there were moments when his behavior unsettled her. He seemed to know things about her life back in Peru that she had never mentioned. One afternoon, as they were reading a book together in the library, he suddenly spoke in a language she didn't recognize, an ancient, guttural tongue that sent shivers down her spine. "Timothy, what was that?" Caitlin asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Timothy looked at her with innocent eyes. "Oh, just something I read in one of Papa's books." Caitlin forced a smile, but her unease grew. She couldn't help but notice the strange artifacts scattered throughout the house, particularly in Bruce's study. There were masks and figurines from various ancient cultures, all with a dark, foreboding aura. The bookshelves were lined with volumes on anthropology, ancient rituals, and demonology. One evening, while Bruce was out and Rose was working late, Caitlin decided to explore the house further. She wandered through the dimly lit hallways, drawn to a door at the end of a rarely used corridor. It creaked open to reveal a room filled with more of Bruce's collections. This time, the objects were even more disturbing. Pentagrams carved into the floor, jars of strange substances, and ancient tomes bound in leather. Caitlin's heart pounded as she scanned the room. This was more than just an academic study. It felt like a place of worship, or worse, a site for rituals. She backed out slowly, careful not to disturb anything. Returning to her room, Caitlin tried to calm her racing thoughts. She had come here for a fresh start, to support her family back home. But now she found herself amid something she didn't understand. As she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, she couldn't shake the feeling that the Davola family was hiding something dark and dangerous. The days that followed were marked by increasing tension. Caitlin continued to care for Timothy, but her interactions with Bruce and Rose became strained. They seemed to sense her growing unease and responded with an overly cordial demeanor that only heightened her suspicions. And Timothy, sweet Timothy, began to change. His innocent questions became more probing, his knowledge of her life more unsettling. Caitlin knew she needed to find out what was truly happening in the Davola household, but she was afraid of what she might discover. The unease continued to grow, manifesting in increasingly strange occurrences around the house. Caitlin would hear whispers at night, a low murmur that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Shadows flitted across the corners of her vision, disappearing when she turned to look directly. Objects in the house seemed to move on their own, shifting positions subtly but noticeably. One night, Caitlin woke up to find Timothy standing by her bed, his eyes wide and unblinking. "You have to help me, Caitlin," he whispered. "They're going to hurt me." Caitlin's heart pounded in her chest. She reached out to comfort him, but he stepped back, a strange look in his eyes. "Who, Timothy? Who's going to hurt you?" Timothy just shook his head and wheeled himself out of the room, leaving Caitlin feeling more unsettled than ever. The following day, she confronted Bruce about Timothy's behavior, but he dismissed her concerns with a reassuring smile. "Timothy has a vivid imagination," Bruce said. "It's part of his charm. There's nothing to worry about, Caitlin." But Caitlin couldn't shake the feeling that there was something wrong. That night, as she lay in bed, the whispers grew louder. She tried to ignore them, but a particular phrase kept repeating, chilling her to the core. "It's time." Determined to uncover the truth, Caitlin decided to investigate Bruce's study again. She waited until the house was silent, then crept through the dark hallways. The door to the study was ajar, and she slipped inside, her heart pounding. This time, she noticed a hidden door behind a large tapestry. She hesitated, then pushed it open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. Taking a deep breath, she descended, the air growing colder with each step. At the bottom, she found a dimly lit chamber filled with candles and arcane symbols. In the center stood Bruce, Rose, and Timothy, all dressed in ceremonial robes. They turned to look at her, and Caitlin's blood ran cold. "You weren't supposed to see this, Caitlin," Bruce said, his voice calm but menacing. "We've been preparing for this night for a long time." Timothy's eyes glowed with an unnatural light. "It's time for the ritual, Caitlin. You're the final piece we need." Caitlin backed away, but the door behind her slammed shut. She was trapped. The Davolas began to chant, and the symbols on the floor glowed with an eerie light. Desperate, Caitlin tried to disrupt the ritual, knocking over candles and scattering objects, but it was too late. The air crackled with energy, and a dark presence filled the room. As the ritual reached its climax, Caitlin felt herself being pulled into a vortex of darkness. She screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the void. When she awoke, she was no longer in the chamber. She was lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by unfamiliar faces. "Miss Villanueva, can you hear me?" a doctor asked, his voice gentle but urgent. Caitlin nodded weakly, her mind racing. What had happened? Where were the Davolas? "You were found unconscious at the Davola estate," the doctor explained. "There was a fire and the house was destroyed. You're lucky to be alive." Caitlin's heart ached with confusion and fear. Had it all been a nightmare, or had she truly uncovered a dark secret and narrowly escaped a fate worse than death? As she recovered, Caitlin vowed never to return to that place, but deep down she knew the truth. The Davolas had been hiding something dark and dangerous, and she had narrowly escaped becoming a part of their sinister ritual. She would never forget the eerie glow in Timothy's eyes, the chanting, or the sense of impending doom, and she would always wonder, somewhere in the depths of her mind, what might have happened if she hadn't escaped in time. Thank you for joining us on this eerie journey. Stay tuned for more spine-chilling tales, and remember, sometimes the darkest secrets are hidden in plain sight.